To speak in your own backyard, so I really appreciate this and the opportunity to share some of our experiences and thoughts about soil conservation. And we're going to be, it's at the soil conservation meeting, we're going to be talking about soil tonight. We're also going to talk about Africa, and actually I really think those two things really go together. Terry, wanted you make sure that you knew who I was, and I think probably most everybody knows we've been in the UP over 40 years now, so we're not Upers, but we're getting pretty close. We live on the ET road, and we're the sheep people right there. I used to work for MSU for a number of years all across the Upper Peninsula. Denise used to be the librarian school teacher at Superior Central Schools, but we transitioned on in life, and now we're just farming, which we really enjoy. And the other thing we really enjoy is traveling. So we're going to share a little bit of our travels, but this will be a travel log, but not a travel log, because I think there's some things that we learned that we really want to share with you. So what I want to know is how many farmers are here tonight? A couple. How many graze livestock? 3, 4, okay. How many in a garden? More, all right. How many do you eat? All right, so really everybody, I've seen a few people in the back didn't raise their hands. I'm a little concerned, but and I'm going to be talking about growing grass, and I apologize for that, but as a livestock grazer, that's really the core business we're in. So everything that relates back to me is growing grass, because that's what feeds my livestock, which feeds me. But I think those ideas carry over, because if we're growing grass, we can probably grow a garden. So the Serengeti, we're going to talk about that, the African Serengeti. It's very unique and indivisible ecosystem. I think it's really unique. And we've been doing a lot of soil health things on our farm, looking at CO2 levels, grazed and post-grazed, and how much CO2 is coming out of the soil. Some really interesting stuff. And then there's people, and how do we all fit into this picture? So let's go to Africa first. So the Serengeti, we talk about Africa, we think like it's a country, and it really, Africa is a continent made up of a whole bunch of countries. And the countries here's Tanzania and Kenya, and the Serengeti region is right up here, touches a little bit of Kenya, and most of it's in Tanzania. And by the way, where that red dot is about the equator, so that gives you an idea about the kind of environment it is. 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of dark, 364 days a year. It doesn't change much, I'll tell you. But it's a high plateau, so it's not that hot. And it does get real dry. So real interesting country. So it's right in the middle of Africa. And I guess I wanted to share the Serengeti with you because it's such a unique ecosystem. You know, it's 110 miles by 110 miles. It's a huge area, okay? It's like 3/4 of the size of the UP. And I keep telling you this, but it's a very unique indivisible system because of the migration. We have 1.5 million wildebeest that migrate around this region, along with zebras and gazelle, and obviously a whole bunch of other animals. When you got that many animals there, there's a lot of predators, there's a lot of birds, there's a lot of other animals to go with it. And we talk about the Serengeti Park, and I'm sure you've seen this on TV. There's a park, but the Serengeti plain is actually bigger than that, and there's like conservation areas. Some of them is a park where, you know, like nobody's allowed to live, or you can't graze your livestock there theoretically. But a lot of areas there are a mix of people and livestock, or wildlife, okay? And it's really a kind of a one-of-a-kind ecosystem, all right? And one of the things that really has appealed to me is, like, as somebody that's a grazer, you know, I hear stories about 50 million bison running across the United States, and I'm thinking, wow, that must have really been something. And it's gone. But this is, you know, it's only 1 million wildebeest, but it's still, you know, it's the closest thing we've got anymore to that ecosystem of what went on. And this is probably really unique because here's the Great Rift Valley, and here's this Serengeti region that's about 110 by 110 miles. There's a park which people are excluded from, but there's all these conservation areas. And these little arrows are where the wildebeest migrate. They go up into Kenya, and they come down here. This is their calving region by the Ngorongoro Conservation Area. And then they go up, and how many of you have seen the national, you know, like Animal Planet and that, with the wildebeest going through the river and the alligators or crocodiles eating them at? I mean, everybody's seen that. That just happens right here, okay? That's just part of That's just part of the whole story. So it's a huge area. By the way, there's Mount Kilimanjaro, there's Mount Kenya up in Kenya, so it's a really unique type of area. As you can see, this is a whole year migration. And just even building a road across this would just really screw things up. So it is a very unique area. As I said, it's not just these wildlife areas. This is cattle, and this is not real deep pasture, okay? You can see this kind of short grass country, but look at the condition of these animals. I mean, you don't see skin and bones here. They're real nice and shiny and good looking. Here's a bunch of goats in real rough country. So there's lots, just tons of livestock, okay? And people. Here's a Maasai village. And this is not like an old village. This is like a real life village where the Maasai live. And they bring their animals in the middle in this enclosure to crawl every night because of lions and predators. So, and the one thing you won't see in any of these pictures is fences. There are no fences. It's just one big area. And when I say big, I mean, so we're driving across this, and here's this huge area. I mean, you can literally, as far as you can see, it's just big flat areas. Here's some Maasai's herders with their livestock, and there's herders with, in other words, with multiple herds. Two bulls are fighting, so the Maasai's are coming up to separate the bulls from fighting. And then when I looked at this picture, I didn't realize there were zebras in that picture. So, I mean, the wildlife and the domestic animals are just all mixed in together in that. And there's a Maasai warrior, and they dress that way, often in red. They'll have their spear and usually one or two cell phones. And I mean it. So, and there's really, it's very productive, and there's really a lot more livestock there than you think about, because here's a herd of goats and some cattle, and there's another herd, and there's actually a third herd clear back here. So there's just a tremendous amount of livestock in this region, and it's all herded. There is no fences. The Maasai go out every day to herd them. So as we're driving across these areas, this is the roadway that we were on. So there is no major road. That is the road, okay? The next thing was where you just drive across open land. Nothing there. I show you this picture because there's a lot of donkeys, because that's the beast of burden over there, and a bunch of sheep and some goats grazing here. Notice the length of the grass. This is just outside the official Serengeti Park. This is the amount of grass in the park. So theoretically, they're not supposed to graze in the park. So as long as they have enough grass outside, there's no domestic animals inside. And that's what you get, is just a tremendous amount of grass from the grazing season. And here's what you find in the grass. Okay? And it's really interesting. You're driving along, and our driver will say, I think there's a lion over there, and you stop for a second, and one head comes up, and then another head comes up, and another head comes up. So it's like, oh, that's interesting. This is the northern part of the Serengeti, and there's these plains where, of course, the wildlife there don't like to graze in that real tall grass because you can't see predators coming. So they tend to congregate in areas where they grazed it down short. And it's just an unbelievable amount of wildlife there in terms of their zebras, topis, gazelles. A little farther up here is a mama cheetah and her two babies. They're getting pretty big babies right now, and they're stretching and thinking about going to look for lunch. There's one of a close-up of one of the baby cheetahs, and they're just such a beautiful face. I think they're just really special creatures. So down in that valley, this is actually what they called Hyena Valley. Thank you. Got my helper with me. So you jump in if there's anything I missed, and anybody else has got any questions or comments, don't just holler out. So here's Hyena Valley. There's a pack of hyenas there. There was about 70 or 80. You wouldn't see them all in one pack, but they were all scattered out there. They like to lay in the water during the hot day. A couple lions going off to look for lunch. And we think about, you hear about this predator-prey stuff, and it's something that I work with low-stress animal handling. We talk about predator-prey and added, but it really, these prey animals know when a predator's looking for lunch or they're just going for a walk. And if they're just going for a walk, it's cool, no problem. They don't waste energy running away just because you see a lion. So it's really interesting how they get along. You can see the zebras are just watching hyenas there, and topis like to always stand with their feet up so they can see better. And just again, an amazing amount of livestock there. wildlife. I'll get it. They're all livestock to me. This is actually an eland kill we went by in the morning with a male lion and a couple female lions there. Again, just kind of a close-up of one of the lions peeking through the grass at you. That day when we went by, we went out and spent the morning on a game drive, and so we went by in the morning, there was that much there, and by that, just before lunch when we came back, the jackals were carrying off the rib cage because that was all that was left. So it pretty much disappeared that day. And then, of course, there's a few, there's elephants in the region, and hopefully I can make this work. No. Is there a volume? This was actually taken with my cell phone. Can you hear it? I don't know what you did. No, wrong one. That's all right. We'll move on. The neat thing was that he was close enough that you could hear him ripping the grass up. I apologize it didn't work, but it's really neat. So we came down to the southern part. Like I said, I was really interested in the calving region, and the tent camp where we stayed. This was our looking out where our camp would be, and when the wildebeest are there, that's what it looks like. Now, when we were there, that's what it looked like. The wildebeest were not there because they literally talk about intensive grazing. They're there, and then tomorrow they're somewhere else, and then they're somewhere else. They just keep moving along. So that's where we stayed, and this is a fire pit where we. After you come in at night, you always have to have a sit around, have a drink before you eat supper, and then there's kind of an access road that drives around the tent region. And the reason I mention that is so we're laying in bed one night, and there's two lions roaring outside our window. They're walking down that road outside our tent there. And so I'm laying in bed, and I take out my cell phone and put it on video, and you can hear the bed sheets and you hear the lions. We'll bring it up later and make it play for people, but right now, that's the lions outside our bed at 2 o'clock in the morning, or outside our window at 2 o'clock in the morning. Tent window, that is. So we did find a wildebeest cabin, and this is the herd, and I don't know how to take a picture because when you're in a vehicle and you get up in the top of the vehicle and you can literally do 360 and everything looks the same. It looks like that everywhere. And there's wildebeest here, there's wildebeest there, there's wildebeest on the horizon. There's one that just calved. And we tried to ask our guide in that we were with, so how many wildebeest are here? And he says, I don't know. There's 50,000, 5,000, I don't know. You just don't know. And they're all calving between 9 and noon. And you would think you could catch somebody calving. It took us 2 days to finally catch somebody calving. Yeah, Jim?
Is there a lot of flies and biting insects when those animals are like that?
No, and I'm going to show you why. There is no bugs. Literally, Denise?
Yeah, no.
No, there is malaria. There is a chance of mosquitoes. There is a little mosquito. They don't know what UP mosquitoes would be like. Our UP mosquitoes don't need to carry disease. They can do it all by themselves. They're carrying malaria, but no, there's not hardly any bugs. And you would think with that many animals, the other thing you would think would be a whole bunch of stuff on the ground, and there wasn't. So as I mentioned, you see all these new babies are like exactly the same size. Anybody that's been around animals, like an old cow, she would go isolate herself and lay down and calve. The wildebeest kind of do the opposite. They go where a bunch of other wildebeest are and lay down and calve. So they don't stick out. The hyenas, about 9 o'clock, it starts getting hot, and they quit hunting. And the lions hunt at night. So if you're born after 9 o'clock, the hyenas probably won't get you. And if you're born by noon or 1 o'clock, by nighttime you're probably big enough you can run along and stay up with mother. But if you're born too late in the day, then you're not fast enough to run at night to stay with the herd. And whether you don't have to outrun the lion, you just have to stay with mother, because if you get lost, I mean, can you imagine have one lost baby and 5,000 other wildebeest? It's like, where are you, Mom? It's like, who knows, you know? So it's really, that timing over the eons has literally got down between about 9 o'clock and 1 o'clock. There's always a few outliers, but they don't contribute to the gene pool down the road because they're not there anymore. So Jim asked about bugs. You can hear that. So that's a dung beetle rolling a ball of dung that's probably bigger than a golf ball. So all the dung from all those zillions of wildebeest out there, he's rolling it. That dung beetle is probably an inch and a half long, so that gives you an idea how big that is. And he will roll it over to a spot and dig a hole and bury it and lay an egg in it. And they're literally all over, checking out which way to go.
He's got it figured out. He's heading for the hole.
I was worried about it. I thought I wouldn't be able to find the hole.
So it's pretty amazing. So that's why you don't have so many flies out there. There's no manure. Pretty interesting. So kind of wind down our Serengeti tour. I mean, I could show you a zillion pictures. I could show you. We caught a couple lioness chasing an eland with a bad front leg, and got a little bit of that on video and that. So it's a pretty unbelievable place. And there's a daddy cheetah. I think the difference in the heads is pretty amazing. They're just beautiful animals. But the real reason I showed you the Serengeti is there's some stories that go with it about ecosystems that I think are really kind of open up your mind thinking about things. We're going to talk about grazing upwind, acacia ants and giraffes, and the resilience, okay? So this is actually a kudu, which is not in a Serengeti. They're in South Africa, but they eat acacia, this really thorny bush. And they have to graze upwind. And they found out about this because on a game farm, 300 kudu showed up dead one day, and they were trying to figure out why. And it was because of the tannin produced by the acacias. So the acacia, when it's eaten, produces a tannin. It transmits an ethylene into the air, which can travel 50 yards, and the other acacias downwind will increase their tannin production in 5 to 10 minutes. So one acacia tree is telling the other acacia tree, hey, watch out, we're getting eaten, increase your tannin levels. Isn't that unbelievable? I mean, and this like happens in literally minutes and that. So the kudu in this park, there was a whole bunch of acacias, but it wasn't big enough, and they ended up grazing some that had already had increased tannin levels to survive, and that's why they died. And that's how they found out about it. So the antelope, the kudu, graze upwind to get a tannin-free meal.
Wow.
So here's we're just driving along, and all of a sudden here's some giraffes and a few zebras, and actually I think we need to make a puzzle out of this, because Denise and I have looked at this real close, and I think we can come up with 16 giraffes in that picture. Some of them are just a giraffe leg, or maybe a head, but there's like 16 different giraffes in there. And giraffes eat acacia. I mean, you've all seen the picture of them eating it. And a lot of the acacias they eat are what they call whistling thorns. This is another thing about Africa. You want to get used to thorns. You know how, if anybody's ridden the back of a pickup and there's a tree branch, you just kind of let it slide off your back? When you're in Africa, you don't do that. You duck. Because trust me, this is not a bad one, because it's just really stick you. There's what they also have as a hook. Going away, yeah, that's it, the going away one. It has a spear one and it has a hook one. So you hit the spear, and when you jerk back, you get caught in the hook. And it really opens you out. So, really nasty. But in this whistling thorn acacia, it puts out a gall, and if you look close, there's an ant right there that comes out of that ant hole, okay? And the ants protect the acacia from giraffes. They bite their nose when the acacia comes. So if you protect the acacia trees from grazing, they'll go bigger, right? So they fenced out a bunch of acacia trees, and 10 years later they came back and they come to find out the trees were in decline. The rest of the story was no giraffe, less need for the acacia to feed the ants, less food and shelter for the ants, less biting ants, more stem-borer ants, more stem-borer ants, more wood-boring beetles, less acacia. So it took them 10 years to kind of get that to happen, you know, because the first year the acacia did better, but then so life is really complicated. You know, we do this and we think that's going to happen. This took 10 years to show up, okay? Really interesting. The other thing is resilience. Maybe 10 years isn't even long enough. In 1860, looking back at some of the history of the Serengeti, 1860 there was lots of elephants. In 1890 the population collapsed again because of this ivory poaching. That was kind of the good old days when everything was made out of ivory and a lot of the old carving and that was done. And in 1930 people said they saw 2 elephants when they crossed the whole Serengeti. I mean that's unbelievable. And by 76 we were back to 3,000, in 86 it was 400, and back to 3,000 by 20 years later. The resiliency. Some of that was birth, some of it because the elephants, Tanzania did not have a good anti-poaching program, Kenya did, so the elephant said, man, we're out of here. They went to Kenya. I'm serious. And then they came back after Tanzania got his anti-poaching program going, elephants came back home, you know. It's amazing. Due to rinderpest disease in 1890, it was from India, brought by, the Italians brought cattle from India to Africa, northern Africa, and it went through the disease, rinderpest went through the whole country. 95% of the cattle, beef, buffalo, and wildebeest died, and many of the people died because the Maasai depended on their cattle to survive. Here's a graph, and you can see that the population was clear down less than 200,000, like 100,000. And when they got a vaccine for rinderpest, and because it's a disease carried by the cattle, so you got it out of the cattle, then the wildebeest didn't get it, and look at what happened to the wildebeest population. Went right back up to 1.5 million, just like that. So as a veterinarian myself, you know, vaccines are good. So we're talking to the guys, and they say, as you saw in that one picture, we have zebras and wildebeest and cattle in close proximity to each other. The wildebeest can give cattle malignant catarrhal fever. So the Maasai, most of the time, keep their cattle away from the wildebeest. If they ever get a vaccine, so you can vaccinate the cattle for malignant catarrhal fever, then all the cattle are going to go where the wildebeest eat. It'll actually, you know, the wildebeest won't have that natural keep the cattle out of your protection anymore. So it's so hard to say this is good, that's bad. Vaccines are good, vaccines are bad. It all depends. I mean, look at what it did to rinderpest, and just think what would happen with malignant catarrhal fever. So ecosystems are much more complicated than we realize. I mean, there's a whole bunch going on here. Some things take time. And nature bats last. I mean, I think we always forget that it'll fix itself, okay? So I want to keep going though, because I said Serengeti, soil, and you. And I'm talking a little bit about soil because we're going from the visible to the invisible, from the unique one-of-a-kind to what you got on your place. In fact, you can almost say you're going to walk on it, get into your car, but you may not. But we need to look at the soil food web. And I think we're just starting to talk about this, and it's really, really critical that we begin to really appreciate how much life is below the ground surface. There's more pounds of life down there than there is above. And we've thought about it as being dirt, and we've talked about dirt and soil, but there's really life down there, and we need to think about it. And it's not simple life, it's what they call these trophic levels. So you maybe have bacteria, and then you have protozoa, and then you have shredders, earthworms, and nematodes, and arthropods. And so somebody come out with this Monsanto's going to come out with this new bacteria additive so we can be biological farmers, you know, Monsanto, the the bad guys, quote unquote, all right? Yeah, but they're going to spray bacteria. Where are the earthworms coming from? Where are the nematodes coming from? You know, there's all these trophic levels, so this is really complicated going on. And we're never really going to understand. There's literally more bacteria and fungi in a teaspoon of soil than there are people. It's just amazing how much is going on there. We can't see the soil life, but we can see the impacts. And we're talking about growing grass again, because if we can understand growing grass, maybe we can understand soil life a little bit more. So what does it take to grow grass? I mean, that's a pretty simple thing. Sunshine, water, fertility, and diversity is the real key things. And maybe you remember way back when you were in school about the photosynthetic reaction. But it's good to remind you that it's sun and green leaves with photosynthetic activity produces what? Carbohydrates, sugars, carbon, okay? This is like free energy. You know, petrochemicals like this gas station over here is selling you is a product of photosynthetic activity many years ago. But it's free energy, and this is what drives the whole system. So this is really critical. And it takes the sun, green leaves, and some water and CO2. So this photosynthetic reaction is really critical stuff. And so how do we capture more sunshine? If it's free energy, how do we get more of it? We need more green growing leaves, more plants, bigger leaves, more actively growing plants, more leaves for more days. You know, if anybody drive by these cornfields these days, and these corn are planted like that far apart, and the leaves all go up. I mean, we used to plant 15, 20,000, and we're up to what, 35,000 plants per acre now, Jim? Trying to get more leaves out there to catch more sunshine. That's really good. What's wrong with corn? How long does it have all those leaves? About 60 days. You know, then it goes, so, and we got a 6, 8, 9 month growing season potentially here. I mean, our plants at home are sucking up sunshine today for about 30 minutes when it was out. You know? So, more days and more green growing leaves. And just to show you how important it is, when you cut off orchard grass at 4 inches, it's in a negative photosynthetic reaction. In other words, it's actually using up more energy than it's producing. It has to be at least 7 inches long before it's actually generating more energy than it takes to live. What about water? Is your soil catching and holding all the rain? And soil that has a plant litter cover will stop the rain from running off, and it needs good aggregates and pores so the rain gets in the soil. Think about tilled versus non-tilled soil. It all has to do with soil aggregates. We're going to talk, I'll show you a slide on that too. Catching the rain. This is overgrazed, hayed, rotational, where you got grass. You know, we don't want bare ground. We don't want even grazed short ground. We want stuff that's sticking up there to slow the rain down, okay? So how's your pore space? You know? So here's a little simple infiltration test that you can do. You take a 6-inch ring, or thereabouts, it really doesn't make any difference. Pound it 3 inches of the ground, a 500 ml bottle of water, and dump it in there, and see, that's about 1 inch of rain, give or take, and time how long it takes to go away. That's, you know, you want to be able to have that water soak into the ground, right? You don't want it to run off. So they did this in South Dakota. They replicated it 4 times, done it in the spring, and the crop was from the previous year. CS is corn silage and CC is cover crop. So where they had corn, and they fall ripped it, they tilled it in the fall, field cultivated in the spring. It took 9 minutes and 45 seconds for 1 bottle of water to run in the ground. Okay? That's the first bottle of water. Where there's corn silage and no cover crop, it took a minute. Corn silage and a cover crop was 41 seconds.